Hi, everybody. I'm Dan Wells. I write horror, fantasy, and science fiction, and I talk about games on the internet. Today we are talking about Dishonored, and I just talked about Conan Exiles, the tabletop RPG, and now we're talking about Dishonored, which is another based on a video game RPG. And also, as far as that goes, another Modiphius game. This uses the same 2D20 system that all of the other Modiphius games use, but in service of Dishonored. Now, if you haven't heard of Dishonored, it is an absolutely brilliant world. If you have heard of Dishonored, then you already know that this is a really cool setting that you might be very excited to play games in. The video game itself, the storyline never worked for me. I thought the style of storytelling in the video game fell flat a lot more often than not. But that's the great thing about this RPG, is that it gives you a chance to use the toys and the tools that they were playing with in service of your own story. I guess the one sentence pitch for this RPG would be the chance to tell stories set in the world of Dishonored without being saddled with the terrible story in the video game of Dishonored. The gameplay is fantastic, and the world itself is really compelling and cool. Now you can see this picture behind me, where there's a creepy dude with like a kind of skull mask who is lurking on the edge of a building, ready to go and assassinate this very rich, kind of Victorian-looking dude inside of a fancy house. That's what the game is about. The video game was an assassin. This expands that and lets you tell lots of different kinds of stories that aren't necessarily assassins. So the world of Dishonored that I keep raving about is kind of they call it whalepunk. Whalepunk Victorian. Whereas steampunk is a world in which everything runs on steam, cyberpunk is a world where everything is cybernetic and you have the internet and near future technology and things like that. And there's other things. There's diesel punk, there's sandal punk, there's all these different kind of punks, which is mostly just a bastardization of the original cyberpunk genre naming convention. But what whalepunk means is that this is a Victorian Industrial Revolution setting, similar to what you would see like in a Charles Dickens story, in Oliver Twist. Poor people on the streets, starving and overworked and possibly freezing to death, and then very rich, wealthy people in their homes. And all of this is made possible by whale oil. There are these huge sea monster kind of creatures that are kind of like whales, but also kind of like squids or krakens or something, and there's some cool pictures in here that we might have a chance to look at later. But they have oil, and just like actual earth whales that have valuable oil in them, one of the main things that you get from these scary monster whales in this setting is this magical oil that can be used to power incredible devices. It has this amazing electrical potential. And so all of the technology in this world is based on what are essentially fuel canisters of whale oil that power them. And they power incredible devices. There's amazing magic. There's cool, police that have these huge stilt robot walker leg things that they can walk around on, and that gives them this vantage point where they can see, and then they can use the whale oil as well to create electrical arcs and discharges to attack bad guys. And so there's this very oppressive dystopian society where the rich and the powerful rule and keep the poor and the labor class, under their boot heel, all powered by these amazing whale oil devices that let them do incredible machines and magic and all kinds of other stuff. And this, of course, is balanced a little bit by what's called the void. And the void is a source of magic power that is kind of in a constant battle between the concept of order and chaos. And in the video game, that was a line that you were very carefully walking, was if you created more order through your actions, then the world would become more orderly. And if you played in a very chaotic way, just kind of wantonly killing, then the world would become more chaotic. And this game does a really admirable job of taking the core D20 game engine and applying it to this system. And it has a lot of the void magic powers as well. Creepy skull mask guy here is able to do things like teleport himself, or turn into a rat, or see through the eyes of vermin, and things like that. And all of those magic powers are brought into this game as well. So let's take a quick look at the character sheet is the first thing that I want to show you. There we go. So this is still the standard 2D20 system that Modiphius uses for Infinity, for Star Trek, for Conan, for everything that it has, but tweaked in a few very interesting ways. In some ways, this feels to me like a combination of the 2D20 system and the Fate system. In particular, the way they use truths and the way they use styles. So, for example, when you're creating your character, you come up with 2 truths about them. And this is the first thing you do. And the first truth is something good, a guiding principle. And that could be your devotion to a specific person, or it could be the concept of charity or nobility or honor, or it could be, I will always pay my debts, something like that. The second truth is something bad, something that hinders your play. Maybe that is a dark secret, or maybe that is a weakness or a disability. Either way, you start with these 2 truths, one that helps you and one that hurts you, as the core of your character. And those, like I said, feel very much to me like the aspect system of Fate or Fate Accelerated. So then you have skills and styles. And this is where we get into a very 2D20-ish system. So like in Star Trek, for example, you have attributes and you have disciplines. And every role that you make is a combination of those 2. And so like if you're going to use the scanners in your ship, then that's reason and science. You add those 2 scores together, you roll your 2 20-sided dice, and if, for every die that rolls lower, then the total of the 2 things is a success. And if you get enough successes, you win. Here they are skills and styles, and I really love this system. And the styles, again, will be immediately recognizable as kind of related to the way they use approaches in Fate. But it still works out the same way. Anything you want to do, you choose a skill and you choose a style and you add them together. So let's say you want to move. But how do you want to move? Boldly, carefully, cleverly, forcefully, quietly, or swiftly? If you are running because you're trying to catch someone or outrun someone, then clearly you're trying to move swiftly. If you want to make a stealth roll, then you are trying to move quietly. If you're trying to bull rush somebody and knock them off a wall, then maybe you're trying to move forcefully. So there's a lot of really fascinating interplay between these 2. And it feels like Fate while still being very solidly 2D20, where you add the skill and the style together, you roll your 20-sided dice, and you try to get under that. Okay? Now, you've got 3 in the 2D20 system. You have 3 currencies that you are tracking as well. One of them is called momentum, and this is always called momentum across every system as far as I can remember. So the way momentum works is, let's say that I am trying to sneak, and that has a difficulty of 1. And so I add my move, and I add my quietly, and I get, let's say that each one of them is a 7, so that's a 14. I roll my 2 dice, and they both roll a 10. So they're both successes. So that means one of those success dice helped me succeed and I sneak. The other one, because it was one extra success that I needed, it becomes momentum. And now that's a little token or a chip or something that I have that I can spend immediately for an effect, or I can save it and use it later for something. I can use it to buy more dice. Next time I need to do something, maybe it's a little harder, it's difficulty 2, and I worry that I'm not going to be able to do it with my normal 2 20-sided dice. So I spend that momentum and I buy a third one, and that makes me more likely to succeed. And momentum is a really great currency system that you can use to improve your skills, to learn more about the world, to do really great things. Now, there is a flip side reflection of momentum that in this game is called chaos. And that is like an evil momentum that the GM uses to create harmful effects, or to bring in extra bad guys, or to let those bad guys use extra powers. And so chaos is something that can be created through exceptionally poor rolls, or sometimes it can be created because the characters are desperate. Let's say that you have a difficulty 3 task, something that's really hard, and you think there's no way I'm going to be able to do this, and I don't have any momentum. Well, you can create chaos in order to give yourself extra dice. And so let's say you buy 3 more dice, so you've got 5, and you roll them and you succeed. Yay, that's great, you won. But in the process, you created more chaos. And now the GM, because you created 3 dice, he's got 3 more chaos in his pool that he can use to do awful things against you. It is a really wonderful system, back and forth interplay of stuff that I have come to really enjoy as I've played all the various Modiphius games. There is, last of all, a third currency called void points. Other games call this determination or whatever. This is something that lets you basically use your truths, your first and second truths, in order to succeed extra hard at stuff. So, let's say that your first truth is that you will never leave a friend behind. You will never abandon somebody. And that's like a core element of who you are as a person. Well, if that aspect, if that truth ever applies to a task you're trying to do, let's say that you are running away from some of those big Stiltwalker dystopia cops, and one of your other players, one of the other PCs in your group, gets shot and falls down, and you need to run back and grab him. And that's going to be an especially difficult activity, and it's going to be hard to do it, but it applies to your truth. Your truth relates to it, because you never leave somebody behind. So because you can tag that truth, you can say, I'm going to spend my void point. And that gives you an extra D10, or an extra D20, sorry, that's already set to a 1, which means it rolled the best possible thing, which means it's essentially a crit, and it counts as 2 successes. So you can use void points to use the truths about yourself to succeed in extremely bad circumstances. All of the elements work together really well, and it's a really great game system that I enjoy a great deal. So let's take a look at the character creation now, that you know kind of the core function of it. Character creation, where are you? Here we go. So you start with the personal truths. First truth, their moral code. The second truth, something that has brought you hardship throughout your life. And then you get into the skills. Every skill starts at 4, and every style starts at 4. And then you have a chance to, it describes what focuses are. And focuses are basically things that expand your crit range. So if you have a focus in archery, and you are trying to use a bow or a crossbow to attack somebody, normally, like I said, if you roll a 1, it counts as 2 successes. But if you're able to apply a focus to something, then your crit range can be much higher than that. And maybe even a 5 would count as a crit. So focuses are valuable. How do you get focuses and talents? through the archetypes. These are what are essentially character classes. So for example, an assassin, this is the idea, this is like that original character from the video game. You start with your aspects and a 4 in every skill and every style, and then you apply this archetype to it. What this does is immediately gives you 2 extra in fight, talk, and then 1 to either move or study. In the styles, it gives you +1 to carefully, clever, or quietly, and you can choose 2 of those 3. Then it's going to give you 4 focuses, 11 points worth, so you can build up, maybe you want locks so you can break in and kill somebody, maybe you want stealth so you can sneak around. You decide with those 11 points how good or bad these 4 focuses are going to be. Then you can give yourself talents based on these 3. You can select a single talent from any of these assassin talents. So for example, inhumane determination. Whenever you kill someone, reduce the chaos you generate by 1. So when you kill somebody, normally you're giving the GM some chaos to use against you. But this assassin can kill people without as much of an impact, because that's their whole job. Then you get some belongings, and you get some contacts. We saw here on the character sheet, there's an entire list of contacts, because they can be very important in a city kind of dystopia game like this. So there's a commander, there's courier, there's duelist, entrepreneur, explorer, guide, hunter, inventor, miscreant, scholar, scout, sharpshooter. Those are the archetypes. So there's a lot of variety. There's a lot of different options that you can do. And then last of all, if you want, they have what's called outlooks. There's this concept of heroic character creation. And this is an interesting choice, honestly, for game design, because if you want to start with very basic level characters, then you do what we just saw, right? You create your 2 truths, you pick an archetype, and then you have a couple of extra little final polish things you can do, like giving yourself void points and things like that. What the outlooks do are they're a chance to create something a little more powerful and a little more specialized or flavorful. So for example, let's say that your assassin is very circumspect. You're careful in your decision making, though a little overcautious. You consider all angles, etc. Selecting circumspect provides the following benefits. You get some more skill points, you get some more style points, and you get a circumspect talent. Okay? There's these 3. So there's several different outlooks you can choose, and they are really fascinating. The reason I say this is an interesting choice design-wise is because I'm not sure I would ever choose to not use the outlooks, just because I think they are so interesting. They definitely make the characters more powerful, significantly so, because you're getting several extra points. If you are melancholic, cautious, introspective, often hampered by doubt, you're getting 1, 2 extra skill points, 2 and 2 and 1, so 5 extra style points, and then a whole extra talent. You're essentially doubling your number of talents. So that's a lot. That's a lot of extra oomph to give a character. But they add so much more flavor to it. I really love it. So anyway, this outlook system is really great. It's optional, but I definitely recommend it. So anyway, let's take a look at the game world itself. Okay? Because that is absolutely the draw for me of Dishonored. I played both of the video games, really loved them, even though the story, like I said, kind of kept falling apart, or it had weird holes, or it was frustrating or dumb sometimes. But the world that those stories took place in is just so fun to play through. This Victorian whalepunk dystopia. And so the heart And the core setting of the first game is Dunwall, which is very much a London-inspired setting, in which, you've got this poor working class that is oppressed by the wealthy. You've got kind of lightning gates around. There's a plague of rats. There's also a lot of flooding, and some districts of the city are completely flooded, which made for some really fascinating levels in the game and also some really interesting places that you can explore in the role-playing game. This has the long legs of the law. That's talking about those big stilt walker guys. There's different eras you can play in depending on whether you want to play before or after the kind of terrible coup that took place in the first game and how that relates to things. And then there's another coup in the second game, spoiler warning. So there's a whole timeline of the world, but then it talks about the districts, and there are so many different districts of the city, and everyone is presented here with a description of what it's like, and then the real truth about it. So there's hidden secrets to learn, and then story hooks. And there's so much information. Here's the flooded district that I was talking about, which is such a cool and exciting area to discover. But you've got ports and docks. You've got all these different neighborhoods, and all of them are very distinct, both visually and narratively. So anyway, Dunwall is just a wonderful setting, and I hope that you are seeing the appeal, the allure of it as we scroll through this art. Here's these enormous stone walls and viaducts and things, and you can see this kind of Victorian skyscraper stuff in the background, and also there are rail lines that use this whale oil technology to run these sparking deadly trains all through the middle of the city. Here's a cool map that it shows where some stuff is. It's 2 pages long. Anyway, the other major setting is the one from the second game, which is called Karnaca. And Karnaca is more of like a mainland Europe thing. There's no precise analogs to it because it is not Earth. But think of it more as like an Italy, where it's a little more refined, it's a little more pastoral. It isn't the big industrial nightmare that fake magical London is, but it is still not an especially wonderful or peaceful place. It's just a little more refined and a little more classy. And so there's lots of description. You get the same idea of eras of play, and then you get different key like people and gangs and stuff. And then, of course, you have all the same thing. There's the key locations that all include secrets and story hooks and everything else. There are areas that were not really explained in or visited in the games. So there is an island called Morley that's hinted at in the video games, but is explained in thorough detail here in the RPG. There's another area called Tivia, which is kind of more Scandinavian. There's also a whole section talking about sailing out. If you want to actually do some whaling and fight a whale. I don't know actually if they give stats for how to fight a whale, but how to be a whaler, what kind of things to consider if you want to have a sea-based adventure. So then we get into descriptions of people. So what are, they have the common folk here, street peddlers, gang members, witches, all the people, and then, of course, tall boys. Those are those stilt walker guys that I was talking about. They're very deadly foes. Now, that's on the street. They also have all of the kind of more upper-class foes that you can face. Instead of just a street peddler, there's a merchant. There are scholars. There are aristocrats. All of these people. And then out in the wilderness, or just in the darker corners of the city, are you going to run into a swarm of rats. And indeed, there is a whale. You can see that it does have kind of tentacles on it and extra fins. This is kind of an alien monster whale. They're very big and scary. In the second game, one of the major obstacles you would often have to deal with were blood flies. They have all the rules for blood flies. They've got these nasty kind of monsters that help or are controlled by the blood flies. They have all these different things, and then of course they have the named characters. So people like Delilah Copperspoon, who was a major nemesis in the second one. Emily Caldwin and Corvo Atano are like the main. Corvo's the main character in the first game. The Outsider, who's the representative of the Void, who can step in and he's the one in the video game that gives you your powers. You can use him in the tabletop game for various things as well. And there's all kinds of stuff he can do. There's this kind of nasty witch named Granny Rags, who is both a help and a hinderment, and you can use her as well. And then, last of all, there is the Oil Trail. This is a 4-part adventure campaign. It isn't really a campaign, it's just a 4-part adventure that kind of helps you take all of this material and then tell a story. So even if you haven't played the video game before, here's a cool idea for a story. Anyway, I really, really love the world of Dishonored. I don't know if I have said that enough. It has this incredibly evocative Victorian vibe to it. The kinds of stories that you can tell in this world and the kinds of things that are made possible are just endless and fascinating. And then the way they have taken the D20 game engine and tweaked it and flavored it so that it fits perfectly into the Dishonored setting. The way they've come up with bone charms and magic powers, which I didn't even talk about, all work flawlessly, and they're really evocative. So if you want to play in dystopian, magical, Victorian London, and you want to be an assassin who can turn into a rat and who sneaks around trying to foment rebellion and bring down corrupt rulers in a whalepunk society, this game is so great. It's really exciting. It's brand new. The digital copies have been out for a while. The hard copies just released this week or last week. Just barely happened. Yeah, it was last week. So, check it out. It's great, and I think you will really enjoy it. And also, don't let my griping about the storyline in the video game turn you off of that either, because the gameplay is still really fun. And the world and the visuals are all delightful. And so, if you're into stealth games and assassin games, the video game's fun. But the main thing I am recommending to you is this RPG, because I really love the way they handled it, and I think it offers you a lot of things that no other game does. So anyway, thanks for watching this video. I am Dan Wells, and you are awesome.